All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to LUMIX Live this week. Obviously, it has been a very busy week here for the LUMIX team. Lots of exciting stuff announced with the S1R Mark II, and I know that there are tons of questions out there. So I'm going to do my best to be able to get through as many questions as we can as possible today. So just please make sure to tag at LUMIX USA, as you can see very many people are doing in the chat already. That just helps me understand that that's a question, not necessarily a comment. If you do just have a comment, don't tag. I will try to get through some of those, but yeah, just make sure to tag at LUMIX USA so I can get through as many of these questions. And just for clarity for everybody, especially if you're new to LUMIX Live, I can't answer any questions about future product or firmware or any of that kind of stuff. So if that's what your questions are while you're here, I don't want to waste your time. I will not be answering anything like that. I don't have anything to talk about. So take that as you will. I appreciate you joining in. Maybe hang around because maybe you'll learn something new about this camera, because I do have the camera right here. I've got it all set up so we can actually go through and connect in with HDMI. So we're going to be able to go through the menus and actually talk about where some of these settings are, what they do, and just kind of, yeah, address as much as you all want to know about it. So with that, you saw at the beginning, LUMIX Pro Services. We're not going to cover too much about that on this particular stream. We have it available in the US, so red tier. If you're picking up a new camera, make sure to get yourself registered on that. You can follow the QR code at the beginning, or I'll make sure I put a link down in the description. Outside of that, yeah, we also have the Platinum tier. It's the higher paid level service that gets you next day repairs, free shipping both ways, all that kind of fun stuff. So encourage you to check all that stuff up. Yeah, so let's kind of take it from the top and go through some of the questions. If you were here beforehand and you put your questions in like a day or two ago, they may not still be in the chat anymore. YouTube likes to clear out questions that come up ahead of time or comments. So just drop it back in there if you don't see it. So let's see here. All right, Cam. So Cam's question, I can't answer the first part of this. However, I can answer the second part of it. Can the storage capacity limits of SD 512 gigabyte and SSD 2 terabytes be extended to current larger capacities? So within our cameras, the storage capacity limitations are still the same. So it is up to a 2 terabyte external SSD. I believe that also translates to up to a theoretical 2 terabyte CF Express card. I'd have to double check on SD cards, considering that 1 terabyte SD cards are starting to come out. Although you have some challenges with speeds on the higher density SD cards. I just don't have any of the check, and I don't know if they're kind of spread across the market enough yet that a spec change or an update to a manual would make sense yet. But I can check with the engineering team on the SD card side of it. I know for a fact SSD and CF Express are 2 terabytes is the largest you can go. Let's see here. Don't really have an answer for Soul on as far as like what would change with various things like rolling shutter and stuff like that. Believe me, I know for a portion of people out there, rolling shutter is a question about this camera. I would say definitely go watch a ton of different reviews of it. Watch it actually in situation. Watch some of the lab testing of it. Watch the kind of more of the empirical testing for it, but then actually take that figure and look at the those that have actually gone out and used the camera in real world situations to kind of make a judgment as to whether or not it would be something that impacts you. It's important these days, I think, for everything. Spec lists are one thing. How a product actually works in the field can be a totally different story than what a spec list looks like. So I encourage you to do that. I also encourage you that once these cameras get out into the rental network and your dealers, go get your hands on it. I encourage that for everything. I know a lot of people do. You may have a preconceived notion looking at just a white paper of specs. But once you actually pick these cameras up, it's a totally different story. So definitely encourage you to go take a look at that. I can tell you for the limited type of filmmaking I do, for what it's worth, never any problems. I've used products that are way worse when it comes to that particular case. So yeah, definitely that's my recommendation. Go out, take a look. This may be a whole big nothing burger for a lot of people. Not saying that it isn't for some, but the vast majority of people in your situations, it's probably not a problem. Let's see here. Tobias says, please, can you clarify on what has caused some confusion and what you didn't clearly answer at launch? Okay. C4K at 100p or 120 frames. No subject tracking, but still PDAF, APS-C, or DFD only. So to be clear, there's a couple things that I do definitely want to clear up from various reviews that have come out there, because there's a lot of very incorrect information, and we've done our best to kind of let those people know, like, hey, what you said was wrong about the specs, or maybe it wasn't clear, either what they meant or terminology used. So with the camera, there is a difference in tracking mode, which is an actual mode on the camera, so I can actually show you all this. And I'm sorry, I'm working on my laptop, so I have to swap screens to make sure I'm showing you the right thing. So there is a difference between tracking mode, which is this, which is very specific, like the AF mode of the camera, versus being able to track a subject or an object. So when it comes to the higher frame rate options, so say you're in 120 frames per second, yes, subject detection is not available in 120 frames per second. Your focus still will be able to track things. You'd still be able to use AF tracking mode, or you can use one area plus, whatever mode you want to use. And our system, like always, utilizes the appropriate focusing system for various different modes. And it's going to change depending on a number of different factors: resolution, frame rates, mode that you have the camera in, all that kind of stuff. Every camera does this, just to be clear. This is not something that's just unique to us. You see this a lot in very, very low light scenarios, where cameras typically in ultra low light, when they go below where PDAF really doesn't work well, they revert to a contrast system, because contrast actually works better than PDAF in really low light scenarios. And when I say really low light scenarios, I mean like no light scenarios, because that is another distinction there. So systems in general, all of these cameras use the mode that is most appropriate for the various different recording option. When it comes to stills photography, this is something that actually, again, I want to be very clear on. There were a few out there that said that the camera loses tracking in high burst rate photography, whether it's in the electronic or it's in the mechanical shutter. And that is just patently wrong. The camera does still track. You have subject detection. You have the ability to use full area, say, and have it, look on a subject and grab it, and then you're good to go. It is that tracking mode that we showed that sometimes you'll have access to it. Actually, for like 99% of use cases, you have access to it. In very specific scenarios, it turns the tracking, quote unquote, mode off, and then goes to where you would use either full area, zone, and then you can use your subject detection that way. The other thing to remember is that our system also has this ability that your subject tracking can be used in any of these AF modes. So if I'm in any of these options here, I can use AF, I can use the subject detection. What happens, and I've seen this in a lot of the videos out there, is someone may be in like one area, and then they're moving the box around, they've got the box maybe something like this, but when you look at the video, the box is like all the way over in the corner, or they've moved it off to one side, and then they're wondering why subject detection doesn't work, why it's not picking up a face or an eye or a car, motorcycle, bicycle, train, plane, any of the modes. When you have the camera set up in any of these modes where you have your box as your kind of what I always call fallback, The system will only turn the subject detection on when the subject touches that box. This is good for certain scenarios. This is how I shoot with the camera, primarily because I want to be able to say, hey, if for some reason subject detection can't see or pick up the item that I'm looking at, I want to be able to tell the camera, this is where I want your focus to go. I don't want it to assume in full area and say, oh, I'll just pick wherever. In cameras like this, especially when you're in higher end products, there is a level of like, you still need to put some input into these products. So that's one other thing when it comes to like tracking and what terms are being used interchangeably, but because of the way our system works and the terminology we use in our system, sometimes that gets crossed and people think that it just means no tracking happens. So yeah, end rant. Next up, we had here, Tobias also asks, you mentioned many times that Sigma lenses are considered first party with no restrictions. So does the new Cropless EIS work with Sigma glass? I heard it only works with LUMIX lenses. Yeah, so from a functionality perspective and compatibility, yes, Sigma, Leica, Samyang, Astro, everyone that's part of the L-mount Alliance, everything is first party. They're all native lenses. When new features get deployed into various cameras, though, there can be times where it's either lag or maybe hardware doesn't exist within certain products within the lineup because they were designed before some of these things ever existed. And in this particular case with Cropless EIS, which I'll show you how to get to it in system, it is a LUMIX lens requirement. So you do have to have a LUMIX lens if you want to use the Cropless image stabilization or electronic image stabilization. I do not have any information as to whether that's something that in the future can be added for support for non-LUMIX lenses. There is a lot of behind the scenes as to how Cropless EIS works. A lot of it involves being able to understand everything about the optic design of a lens and how things like corrections and image area of coverage look like and how they interact on the sensor themselves. But just remember, this is new. No one else does this in their cameras. So again, it kind of goes to that point of when you've got things like this that are super new, sometimes there may be lags between when full compatibility hits or honestly, like I said before, if other existing or pre-existing hardware has what's needed to be able to make a mode like that work. I can tell you that like with a lot of our system, we rely heavily on things like very high precision gyros, the optic design, like I mentioned before, and having a baseline understanding of how everything works in tandem together between the lens and the camera. That's what allows us to do a lot of these things. And that's a segue because I know somebody else asked this question in the chat about dual IS. It's the same thing with dual IS. We support dual IS too on the L-mount lenses. So whether you're using our lenses or you're using, say, like Sigma's lenses or a Leica lens if it has it, we do have support for dual IS2 where the optic has the hardware to support it. That doesn't mean that every piece of optic out there has the ability to do it. These are things that we are bringing into the L-mount Alliance as a system in a whole. Sigma doesn't have something like that within their system. So it doesn't, in cases like that, you just run into some situations where their optic designs, their goals for building lenses just may not have ever considered having something like that. So it's a matter of if the hardware supports it. I've used the 60-600 and it does support it. And it definitely makes an improvement. Is it the same exact level of improvement that, say, you'd have on maybe one of our lenses? Maybe, maybe not. I leave that up to people that are using these lenses. I'm not the best person to look at for ultra telephoto shooting. So in the end, stuff like that always is more of a, does it add a benefit for what I'm capturing? Is it better than not having any of it? Is it better than just lens stabilization or just body stabilization? Because you can choose those options in the menus as well, depending on the lens. But yeah, the whole system, the whole L-mount Alliance, it's kind of the whole goal is that there is native compatibility across the board when it comes to things like focusing and lens corrections and data being transferred between everything. Certain specialty features are where you may run into well, this optic is from this generation. If Sigma can do firmware updates for it, that's cool. I know Sigma has pushed firmware updates onto their lenses that add better compatibility for things like linear manual focus, because again, those are things that we brought into the ecosystem, and others have also kind of looked at it and figured, well, yeah, we can do it. It may not be the exact same level, but they can do it. So yeah, there's that. End rant number 2. Another one from Tobias. With stills and video separated via the dedicated lever, is it possible to set the camera in a way that's that going out and back into C profiles does not reset? Example, to keep previous set white balance. There is, and there is even on the current cameras. It's a little bit of a different way of working, and this is something we've brought up to the engineering team. I actually want to give a huge shout out to feedback from Dan Hopkins. Dan, I don't know if you're watching, but Dan Hopkins gave us a really detailed feedback as to how I would say in general people would want the system to work versus how we deploy it, and ways that it could be improved. And that's one of the things that our engineers always look at, and they take back and they say, okay, is this something we can do? How long is it going to take to rewrite code or rewrite the way certain things work? So we can't make promises that we're going to be able to do that stuff fast or even at all, but they do take this and they kind of bring it into consideration as to, is this something that we can do? So I'd say, yes, there is a way to do it. If I can remember quickly offhand where it is in the menu, I will show you since I've got the camera connected. And this is going to look a little different because the S1R Mark II's menus are actually a little different because now we have the photo video switch. But if I'm going to be in photo mode, I have the full set of C series settings for photo, and then I have a full set of C settings for video. So it basically means that in all reality, this camera is up to 3 separate cameras in one. Because of the level of separation that we've added in here. So when you go into custom mode settings, which would be universal between all of them, you have setting loading details. So this is whether or not you want to have that information be able to be loaded onto that particular mode. And then you have how to reload custom modes. So reload custom modes is that kind of thing that I believe you're talking about. This is where if I change recording modes and then I go back into it, it would go back to what I carbon copied set up at the beginning. If I return from sleep, if I power the camera off, I'd recommend coming in here, turning this off then, because that'll, in effect, it means that your custom settings are just kind of like baseline areas for major settings. But if you make a bunch of changes, they're going to stay to it. So it's a bit of a interesting way to think about custom setups. When or if you decide to do this where you don't want it to change during like a mode switch, I would at least say to keep turn the power on option turned on, so that if you power cycle the camera and come back, it's going to fully reset the things that you potentially changed on that particular job. Just to make sure that, like, if you've got a whole bunch of stuff set up and you always want to be able to use that so that you can get to a baseline, you know that you're only a power cycle away from basically going right back to what you set up, and then you make your changes again. So yeah. Let's see here. There are a lot of questions, and just to be clear, everybody, I am not using low latency mode on YouTube, so if you ask your questions, it may be delayed for me to answer it. It says here from Phil, when using false color shooting video in log, is the false color setting, is false color using dynamic range or LUT applied dynamic range? So the false color system on this, if you've never seen false color, it's really slick. So I've just enabled false color on the camera here. And I have it programmed just to one of my function buttons so I can make my changes to it. And you'll see, actually if I get out of auto ISO, you'll see I can, and let me go to manual. That would be a little better. So let's bring this up to, say, 640 ISO. So if I come here and I start changing my f-stop, you'll see I'm running through the color values here. Now, to be clear, we are in a very overcast day here in the offices. So it's a little tough to actually show you everything about false color unless I really push it hard. But you can see here, like, it's giving me the information. Now I'm in the photo mode with this. It runs on the same system that like luminance spot meter runs or waveform runs on. False color is not available when you're running real-time LUTs though, just to be clear. Real-time LUT adds an additional layer of color changes and potential exposure changes. So if you're using real-time LUT and you have that enabled, you won't be able to use false color. False color will work for log, it works for standard profiles, all that kind of stuff. So it is working based on, you know, your kind of the information coming from the camera itself, not necessarily the color profile that you've got selected. Jesse says, I've already got my pre-order in. I've been an S1R user for 6 years now, and the only thing I needed was Vlog, but you guys went and delivered pretty much everything in this new camera. Yeah, I know, tangent number 3 here. I know a lot of people had some strong opinions online, and it's fair, about the fact that the original S1R was an incredibly photo-focused camera from our lineup. It was also a very large, very heavy camera, which is great for like myself. I loved that camera design. I liked the weight never bothered me. I traveled with it, I hiked with the thing. Never had any problems with the size or weight, personally. But technology moves on, things advance. There are kind of shifts in what people expect out of products over time. And I think the S1R2 is a perfect example of that, where yes, there is an understanding of those of you that want a strictly photo camera. And that's cool. In some regards, I agree. However, the addition of video functionality and features does not affect you in any meaningful way as far as a camera goes. I understand some would maybe have concern about the fact that it's an actively cooled camera. Well, guess what? It's a weather-resistant actively cooled camera. It has no impact on your day-to-day use of the camera. We give you customizing functions for how that fan runs. And honestly, in the photo mode, the fan doesn't even run unless it has to and gets really, really hot out. And that's why we set Auto 2 as the default for it. So from a photographic perspective, I get some of the concern about the feature, from the feature-wise perspective. From a physical perspective, yeah, there's big differences. This is a smaller camera. This is more in line with the S5 Mark II design language. This kind of thing is not new in the industry. The fact of the matter is the original S1 series chassis and designs were designed in part around the hardware and the technology that was available at the time. We were at that point one of the, if not the strongest stabilization within a camera, full frame mirrorless camera. That took up a lot of space and added a ton of weight to the camera. The 5.8 million dot or 5.76 million dot viewfinders at the time needed a lot of space and area for cooling because those cameras were not actively cooled. And the cooling solution that we created for the S1H was a larger, more intrusive for certain users. So decisions were made to not include that, which meant the chassis had to get bigger. When you jump forward to this launch and this particular product, you're now seeing that cooling solutions have been miniaturized. Cooling solutions are fully weather resistant again within our system. So we're able to get things a lot smaller and more efficient. Most importantly, the stabilization units have become way smaller than they were originally. If you were ever around at like Photo Plus or WPPI, one of those shows, we used to do like break-aparts of the cameras so you could see how big the stabilization units were at the time. You look at them now and they're minuscule by comparison. They're still big, they still take up a ton of space within the cameras. But all of that stuff kind of dictates why things change. On the S1R Mark II, we made a lot of ergonomic changes that may not be so apparent just looking at a photo of it. Things like the kind of angle and placement of the different dials. The fact that both of the mode and drive dial are clicking locks now. The positioning of the ports on the side, the fact that you have a fully articulating and full tilt up, tilt down rear LCD panel on this is also changed. So all of those things affect what happens with body designs as they move forward. I know some people are out there saying like this should be called an S5R. I wholeheartedly disagree with you on that. This is a true proper successor to an S1R, the original camera. And again, if you're not someone that ever wants to use video in your cameras, you just never have to flip that switch to video. You get a ton of photo improvements from the original S1R anyway. You get better dynamic range and stills, you get better performance, you get faster burst rates, you get better compatibility with flashes. You have tethering with Capture One out of day one. In fact, actually, Capture One, the public release, has support in it now for it, and it supports the RAW files. And to be clear, definitely use Capture One for your RAW editing and all that kind of stuff with it. I highly encourage, if you're going to be taking a look at any of the samples or anyone provides you RAW files, download Capture One, play around with the files. We worked very closely with Capture One to make sure that everything was proper, that everything worked, so that they have all of the information they need to support the camera. Yeah, it's a solid improvement over the last one. GH5, when set timecode, internal clock would stay accurate for a month. G9 Mark II, when timecode is set, internal clock loses after a day or so. I don't use timecode, so I would have to check with those that do and see what's going on. Can the S1R2 be used as a webcam? Thanks, forgot to add that LUMIX previously. So it does not support UVC, which is the USB video codec or whatever. That's where you can just plug the camera into a computer and tell it to work as a webcam. With this camera, you do need to use an external HDMI capture card, or you could use LUMIX Tether if you wanted. I still highly recommend just picking up a simple capture card for it. I know Kondor Blue, I think, makes one. Atomos made one. Elgato makes them. I'd recommend doing that. I'm using an ATEM mini switcher for this particular one. It's limited to 1080, so that's why we're not streaming in my normal higher res right now. So yeah, there's options to use it as a streaming camera. And tied to that, the HDMI latency is much lower than the previous cameras, so you don't necessarily have to do the tricks of dropping or turning off the audio. So it is a major improvement from the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX. If you looked at anything from the GH7, you would have seen already that we've made big improvements in latency over HDMI. So yeah, 100% go that way with it. Let's see here. Can you compare the thermals and recording times with the S5iix and GH7 reliability from Cliff? Yeah, so I think with a lot of people, obviously we are known for heavy and high reliability within our products. There's no difference with this camera. It is an incredibly reliable, high performance camera. Where things change is that as we go to higher resolutions, when we go to things like downsampling, moving all of that kind of stuff, shifting the types of modes that you're recording, yes, there are chances for different thermal values. We do not time restrict the camera in any way on this product. So that means that it's going to be more up to the environment that you're in. If you're someone that's going to be doing really long takes where you're going to have the thing set up, you're probably not hand-holding the camera for a single take for 40 minutes to an hour in a single shot. At that point, I'm willing to bet that you are probably putting the thing on sticks or a tripod, whatever you want to call it, and you're letting it run there. Well, it's a simple thing there. Put the battery, get a battery grip. Honestly, this is one of the first cameras that I highly recommend getting a battery grip with this. In fact, I think SmallRig's cage is actually designed to fit with the battery grip as well, which I can't remember the last time a cage company built with a grip for cameras like this. So yeah, get the grip. That's going to help with some thermals. Use something like a DCC-18. In fact, my S5 Mark II that I'm using for the stream right here is being powered by DCC-18 and then just plugged into the ground. I mean, it's an outlet, it's not legitimately the ground. And all of those things help remove the thermal load. When you start getting into higher data rates and you're pushing more data across the board into the cards, we now have CF Express B, CF Express Type A in some cameras out there. You've got SD cards, which really never generated a whole lot of heat. These are all new things that, as everyone wants these higher frame rates, these faster burst rates, these bigger data rates with cameras, they're a reality. You either are going to have to go to a much larger camera to be able to offset potential thermal problems or challenges. I never want to call them problems. Or you start to look at how you can get around them. There is a video out there, I'm not going to say any one particular name of reviewers or anything like that, but there is a video out there where the person was getting some thermal problems when they were using internal CF Express cards and batteries in the grip and the camera, and they got like 40 minutes of recording, and then the thermal, and don't quote me exactly on that number, but I think it was about 40. And that was in the 6.4K open gate, which is coming from the 8.1 area. But when they went to SSD and they used something like the DCC-18, which you can use in the grip too, then you had to stop recording because it was getting boring at that point, when you're like 3 hours into a recording session. So it's a matter of understanding how to use your camera. I don't want to make excuses for thermals, but understand that this is a hybrid camera. If you want a video camera, you're going to go to something that's either a more moderate resolution potentially, if that is all you're focused on. The S1H is still one of the, reading commentary, the S1H is still one of the most, praised as far as image quality goes, I would say, from comments I've read online. And they're bulletproof at that point. They're designed for that side of the world. If you're in both photo and video, you've got a really high resolution camera, you've got the ability to do things like 8K for those that want to record 8K, you've got the open gate options, and you have ways to rig the camera up for those situations when you're going to be doing really long takes. I've used this camera in Austin in the summer summer temperature times at near the end of last year, and never really ran into any problems. Because for one, I'm not going to be filming a long take to camera outside in direct sunlight. I'm going to be trying to balance myself out, maybe standing in shade, having the camera in shade. And with just simple things like that, never ran into a problem with it. So, yeah. Assuming there's no way to jam timecode generator like the D80 TC1 or Tentacle Sync USB-C, no, there's no timecode jamming in this camera. Lo-Fi says, is tethered shooting available on launch? I'm sick of renting studio shoots, and that is the reason I ordered the S1R Mark II. And what about the S5 II? Will it work tethered now too? So Capture One tethering is just the S1R Mark II. I have no information as far as whether or not Capture One will deploy S5 Mark II or Mark IIX or any of the other cameras. But the S1R Mark II is the camera that is launched with it, and that's the one that they set up with at a launch. So, and yeah, it works already. So the second you get your camera, literally you'd be able to just plug it right in and go. You don't need anything if you've got Capture One. And as a reminder, even if you've never used Capture One before, when you buy the camera, it's going to give you 3 months of a trial of Capture One Studio. So if you've never used it before, it at least gets you in there to be able to play around with it, see if it's something that you like, and then you can make your decision there. Maybe tethering's not important to you. Maybe just raw photo editing is very important to you. I mean, anyone that's been following the stream long enough knows that I've been, very heavy with the Adobe ecosystem, and I still am. But with this particular camera, I highly prefer using Capture One for my raw editing. It took me a while to get back into Capture One, but for me, it just works. I don't really do a lot of tethered shooting, but I like the raw editing in it. If I'm using my S5 Mark II, my Mark IIX, I do my raw editing in Lightroom anyway because I have Lightroom Mobile. On this camera, I find that I'm doing more of my editing on my desktop or on my laptop, and that's when I'm going to use the programs themselves. If I'm creating like ad content or something, or I'm working with our agency team here, and I'm creating something, then I'm going to use Adobe because we use things like Frame.io for project reviews. And it's just, again, even on the software side, it's using the program that works best for you. So, let's see here. What is your take regarding the stacked versus unstacked sensor argument? Do you think trading speed for dynamic range was the right call on an R series camera? Very interesting topic, I think, that we're in this particular world. For one, we don't have a comment on the type of sensor used. It is a BSI sensor, that's all I can say about that. I think in a nebulous form, the concept of stacked versus unstacked, going speed versus dynamic range, everyone's got to make up your own choices and decisions on that. I am heavily in the camp that I don't care about speed. I don't shoot ultra fast moving subjects. I'm not a sports photographer. I don't do wildlife photography. Yes, I photograph things like motorcycles, and that's very fast paced. I've shot F1 before, though amateur level, and all these cameras are fine. I will almost always use mechanical shutter for almost everything, whether it's blackout free or not, but that's because I came from shooting with DSLRs where everything was blackout with those cameras. So I get people's concerns about it. I understand that some people want really, really fast cameras, but you have to understand, I think some of the other people out there have commented this before. You want those things, you got to pay for them. They command a higher price, and it's just choices. You've got options out there. You want something that's got better dynamic range than anything that we've produced, and from the figures that I've seen, now I don't have those other cameras to test myself, in the 45 to 50 megapixel range, we've got the best dynamic range for stills. Yeah, it's just a matter of what your priorities are with it. It's an interesting question. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think that question is going to be around for quite some time. So as things evolve and as we move through generations of products and all that kind of stuff, who knows? Things always change. We're always going to pick the most appropriate specs and combinations of hardware for what we're designing the products for. And that's ultimately the best I think any company can do, is build the product for the customer that you're designing it for. It's of course not going to fit everybody's needs. I don't think any camera fits every single person's needs. That's the reason why you have so many camera options from different manufacturers. It's the reason why we have so many different car brands, so many different car models, versions, all that kind of stuff. This is not new in our world. I just think people, especially in the imaging industry, because we all love specs, I think to a point, we get defensive about our particular opinions. I think if we all just take a breath, look at it and say, yeah, this person's got different needs than I do, and maybe the camera doesn't work for them, that's cool. But I don't think it's ever anything to get to the point where you're screaming through chat that the company has affronted you over it. So I think that's rant number 5 over. All right, I want to talk about a couple things on this camera, because clearly I'm just running through questions and we've got a lot of kind of more nebulous questions that are coming in. The nebulous questions are great. I'm going to run as long as we kind of need to on this stream, so don't worry about time. But there's a couple things I want to talk about as far as using the camera and some of the differences that you're going to see when you get this compared to any of the other cameras that we've had. So a couple of the things here to talk about is I'm going to start in the photo mode, and then we're going to jump over to the video modes as well, so don't worry. So to start with, there's been a lot of questions about things like the dynamic or the dual native ISO circuitry on this. The camera does still let you select whether you want high or low ISO values, like which system you want to use. That's easy to just go in, select low and high. If you want to ever understand what the native ISO is within a given circuit and a given color profile, go into the settings, click the low or high option. Now when you go into your ISO value, it's going to be able to select the lowest number before you go into extended. That's your native for that circuit. So standard profiles, and I talked about this in the live stream. If I remember, I'll put a card up here that links back to the timestamp that I put in the announcement video. But if you want to see what the high is, go into high, and you'll see that now it changed to 400. It's an easy way to just be able to jump through and understand which native ISOs there are, because they are different in this camera than they are in the S5 Mark II series, or even the GH series if you've used them. So most importantly is, and actually I'm going to come back to this camera for this. I saw a couple comments of people saying like, oh, well, you know, because native ISOs are lower on this camera, that means that it's not going to be as good in low light. I highly recommend you to go take a look at Media Division's video about this. I think he makes a really good explanation in a pretty simplified way of why that's not the case, why it's actually opposite of what you would think, especially with this sensor and what we're doing in this camera. This camera in a video world, even though we're going down to say 2000 ISO for the high range native versus 4000 on the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, this camera is better in low light. You can pull your shadows up more aggressively on this camera, and they're clean, they're detailed. If you take a look at like, I think it's Cam Mackey's video, he does a really good explanation of really what I think all of us know we're looking for, but may have not been able to kind of explain. And that's about having color information in the shadows when you start to pull them up. I encourage you to take a look at all of these videos, because everyone has and covers different aspects that work for them, and you'll get a better, more well-rounded thought of it. So yes, you've got lower native ISOs, but that actually means that you're going to be able to push them harder because the pixels can be saturated better. That's why we go to lower ranges. We do also have a higher kind of normalized range before you go into extended than others in this resolution category, which also tells you that there's more confidence in being able to go up in higher ISOs and not have as much noise, or still maintain a lot of flexibility because the saturation of those pixels, even in the shadowed regions, holds a lot longer than others do. So, Salvage says, Media Division, perfect timing there. Media Division mentioned the mechanical shutter is a carbon fiber blade shutter. Is that true? What is the rated actuations for the mechanical shutter? I believe it was 250K for the GH5. So in the GH5, we never actually published a public spec for that. And at this point, I don't even remember if there even was an internal number for it. But the shutter blades on the S1R Mark II are carbon fiber reinforced. There's a number of reasons for that. For one, because we deployed the shutter close mechanism, we needed to make sure that the blades themselves, the physical materials, were much higher thermal threshold, so they can take a lot more heat without warping or melting. So we moved to a newer material. It's higher durability in general when it comes to that. Now, shutter life cycle is a slightly different thing. Yes, that has some things to do with the blades themselves. When you go to a higher strength blade, you can get longer life out of it. But also that goes down into the motors that are used, whether or not you're using resin components within the drive systems, whether or not you're using metal for gearing and stuff like that. And all of that's been retooled on the shutter mechanism within this camera, as well as the physical blades. So all of those things combined mean that you're going to be getting a 400,000 actuation rated shutter mechanism within the S1R Mark II. So big improvement over, big improvement I think would be a weird way to put it. You get in certain areas, a big improvement over S5 Mark II, Mark IIX. In other areas, it's all kind of the same still. A shutter is a shutter, it needs to work. Truthfully, if you were able to break a shutter at the 400,000 range, I'd be impressed. I know people can do it. That is not a challenge for anyone to do it. I by no way am encouraging people to do this or imply that I would support you if you did it. But know that it is built to last and be incredibly durable within this camera. Will we be able to connect the S1R2 to the RS3 Pro and be able to control shutter, aperture, zoom via USB-C? I believe so. I have not been home yet since the launch of this to test that out with my the RS3 Pro that I have at home. Regardless, the gimbal's probably going to need a firmware update from DJI to add the communication or add whatever tags they need to understand what the camera is. So I would recommend, Jesse, reaching out to maybe DJI, seeing if it's something that they're going to comment on. I don't know if they would comment on it. Kind of like us, we don't really ever talk about future firmware updates. But yeah, I would recommend doing that. Is some kind of compact RAW format being investigated by LUMIX, even like JPEG XL or something? It'd be nice to have some flexibility with smaller file sizes than just RAW. That kind of stuff is always being kind of looked at and evaluated. I would highly doubt you would ever see any camera with JPEG XL. It seems like the industry has settled on HEIF or HEIC, whatever you want to call it, type files. I don't know if that's something that we're ever going to deploy in the cameras, but we always have engineers that are working on that kind of stuff. Is it possible to do on our engine? Is it something that's beneficial? How do you deploy stuff like that? So I wish I had an answer for you, but yeah, I don't know. Whoa, thank you, YouTube. I am so far back on questions here, like really far back. Well, don't worry. If I don't get to your question today, I am probably going to be doing like 3 or 4 weeks worth of these AMAs. I plan on having Matt Fraser join us as well too, because he can explain a lot of the video stuff way better than I can. But yeah. Can you tell us if there's any difference in clarity or brightness between the EVF on the S1R2 and the S1R? Does it keep full resolution and refresh rate at all scenarios? From what I've seen, yes, it keeps resolution, keeps frame rate at all scenarios. You can tell it to go to 120 FPS. I never do. 60 FPS is more than enough for me. I'm not someone that's sensitive to it, so I may also not be the best person to ask about that, but I can check it. I have my S1R back at home. Granted, it's been converted to full spectrum, so I don't know if that's going to change my figures or anything. But shooting with this, I noticed an immediate improvement over pretty much everything else. Is there a change in the color science? It looks great. And is the 5th custom setting have additional settings? I mean, color science is always being refined. We have our color science that we always kind of stick to. So if you've seen content that you like out there graded from this, then cool. That's about all I can say. Color and stuff like that tends to be pretty subjective. So yeah. And is the 5th custom setting have additional setups? Oh, you mean like if I go to C5, do I have additional options? Yes. So C5-1 has up to 3 within it. So you've got C5, 6, 7, 8. So you have 7 options in this. I'm in the photo mode for it right now. So yeah, so you have a couple extra ones in there. Has the 15-minute record limit been removed? There is no record limit on. Oh, hey Tara. Yeah, there's no record limits on the S1R Mark II. So you record as long as your thermals allow you to. McCary, is it possible for the S1R Mark II to add HD 240 or 300 like the G9 Mark II or GH7 via firmware? Competitors in this price range already do 2K 240 and HD 420 with AF. Unfortunate 4K 120 doesn't do subject to tech. I wish I had an answer for you. I doubt it, but yeah. S1R2 recording limits and overheating compared to G9 Mark II. I'd say it's pretty similar, if not maybe a little bit better, because this has an active cooling solution. You can go in there and turn the fan all the way up, which is also going to help you in scenarios. Just be aware that if it's on high or fast, that we call it, you'd probably want to record with external audio. Yeah, that's about it. Does PDAF work at 60 FPS full 4K in full frame? Yes, it does. And that's actually a point. 4K 60p in this camera is 422 10-bit all intra, and it is from a downsampled full sensor width. So you're getting the really highly detailed, better noise performance, all that kind of stuff. Nice LUMIX sweatshirt. How do I get one? Yeah, I love this sweatshirt. This was actually, we got these a little while ago. It's got like camera and like some open gate multi-frame markers on it. I love this sweatshirt. I wish we sold merch, and believe me, I know a lot of our team has been talking about it, wanting to find a way to be able to let you guys see merch or purchase it yourselves. We're just not at that point yet. Is there a bracketing mode with more than one stop separation like -3.0 and +3? Sorry, there isn't. I've asked a lot about this. The more you guys let us know in the comment section on these videos, the more ammunition I have to go back to the engineers to say, look, this is something that people are asking. Can we please deploy it? Is it possible? So if you guys want to see that, put a comment under this video, please. It just helps me because I can point to what y'all are asking for. Let's see here. Can you speak on the grip? What's new, and could it help with things like heat? So Rhett, I did talk about this a little bit earlier, but I'll recap quickly. It can help with thermals. It gives you dual batteries, so it's battery in the grip, battery in the camera. It does power sharing, so if you're doing higher frame rate or higher resolution, more demanding options to an SSD, you can use the grip to provide power for those setups, or you can go to something like the DCC-18 and power it that way. And yeah, it's robust. It's for the S1R Mark II, so it won't fit on an S5 Mark II, and vice versa. Those original grips don't fit on this camera. Don't try, you'll punch a hole in the bottom. Well, you wouldn't punch a hole in the bottom of the camera, but there's a guide pin that's not aligned to anything on this camera. So if you ever tried to force it, and I guess if you forced it hard enough, you could potentially break something. But it's a fully magnesium alloy chassis, so, and I'm not gonna lie, I may have totally tripped and slammed down onto ice with the camera. Once where I didn't have the camera hit the ground, the other where maybe the camera did take a chunk out of the ice, and it's still fine. So, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna look at the camera again. So a couple of things that I want to talk about here is the, where is it? So burst shooting. So on the S1R Mark II, we have an improved burst shooting setting on this camera. So when we go into the burst shooting modes in this camera, you've got, still have the burst shot 1, burst shot 2. And burst shot 1, currently I have set to H+. H+ is going to get you the fastest frame rates that you can get on the camera for mechanical, so that's going to be the 10 or 9 frame per second. And think of H+ or H as more of, I'd say, like a sports thought of high-speed mechanical, or a studio photography high-speed mechanical shutter. Reason for this is because, yeah, your exposure is going to be locked on the first shot. If I'm photographing high speed and I want mechanical shutter in a stadium, my light's not changing, my exposure's not changing. I just need speed. That's my goal. If I am shooting in a studio and I'm working with flash and strobes, I'm controlling the light, I'm controlling the exposure. I don't want the camera changing between each shot because I'm controlling that with lights. So you have that there. You also have your standard high mode, which gets you a little bit lower frame rate, but then also gives you the automatic updating of the exposure. And to my knowledge, I believe this is actually the same with many cameras that are out there in this category. You have a mode that prioritizes speed and the fastest release rate that you can, but you may be locked in exposure. And then you have other modes that are a little bit lower that give you more flexibility for exposure settings. We still have the pre-burst functionality and the standard electronic shutter. These are both 40 frames per second. There was someone out there claiming that we're adding 20 frames per second in firmware, stuff like that. I don't know where that person got that from. As of right now, it is 40 frames per second. Sound off in the chat if that's something that you think you'd like to see, because I would love to provide that kind of stuff to the engineering team. And yeah, that kind of stuff helps. But the new addition into this is behavior in H+ and H mode. You have image priority and speed priority. Now, transparency is a big thing with a lot of what we're doing. So in this particular case, there's a reason why we have these two modes. Image priority for those that your shooting scenario needs 14-bit RAW files. Speed priority in general, especially in the conversations we've had with some sports photographers, a lot of portrait photographers that are using these cameras, you have different needs in different scenarios, where if speed is a priority, you're more likely not going to need to really be doing a ton of editing to each and every individual photo that comes out of it. Because like I said, if you're in a studio portrait session, you're controlling everything with lights. If you're in an indoor sports environment, usually, again, your lighting doesn't change. So you have an option to go for speed and get that extra frame per second out of it. But if you're in a scenario where I really want that 14-bit RAW file, you have the option to change it to image priority, and really you just lose 1 frame per second between that. So you have all those options in there. You can program these however you want. And again, it's in there and it tells you what it is. Another thing that I want to mention here, and I can't do it because I have the HDMI attached, is the S1R Mark II. I know we didn't really talk about this much when we were letting everyone know about the camera, but aside from high resolution shot mode, this camera does still carry live view composite. It carries the time-lapse, the animation options, so that stop-motion animation. We also brought back multiple exposure on the S1R Mark II. I know I've gotten a ton of questions about that. So this camera does have multiple exposure in it. So now you're able to go back and do that kind of stuff. I'm going to prompt you already. I don't know if this is something the S5 Mark II or Mark IIX are going to get in firmware. Because one, we don't talk about future updates and firmware and stuff like that, but I know a lot of people have asked for it. It's back in the S1R Mark II. Go back to a couple questions here. Do you recommend protecting the sensor or protecting the shutter mechanism? Either way, great. We have a choice now. Yeah, it's cool with a choice. And to be clear, the shutter closing mechanism functionality is not coming to an S5 II, IIX, GH7, G9 Mark II. It's not something that we're going to do on previous generation cameras. The physical shutter designs of those were made for different priorities, lighter weight, so it's not coming. Clearly, just making sure. You can clip that if you want. That's coming. It's only on the newer camera. So base ISO 80 is very based with the high res. This might be the ultimate landscape full frame camera. It's awesome having a much lower native ISO range. Honestly, it is. Is this considered internally a photo camera, video camera, or true hybrid camera? True hybrid camera. 100% true hybrid camera. I said this on the B&H stream yesterday. From major camera brands, from us, from everybody else, I don't think you will see a model that comes out that forgoes video options in cameras. And I kind of said this at the beginning. These cameras, as they advance, as everything gets newer, as newer technology happens, as newer hardware is developed, as new software is developed, we're going to have all of this video functionality in the cameras anyway. Digital cameras from day one were always derived from the video world. The reason I say that is because you're reading an image that is being captured in real time. It's not like film where there is nothing there and then light exposes it and then now there's something there in a latent image. So with all these cameras, it costs a photographer nothing to have the the video functionality in these cameras. In fact, I believe DP Review makes a really good article, I think Richard wrote the article about it, that actually explains that in many cases with cameras in general these days, if you stripped out all of the video functionality, cost of a product is actually going to go up because it's a much more niche product. You're not able to see as many people purchasing it, which companies have to figure out and understand how you're going to justify selling a product like that. So to be clear, nothing that these cameras do that add video functionality negatively impacts you as a photographer, with a caveat. I can understand some people's propensity against the fan on the camera, the active cooling. I understand it. In fact, we built the G9 Mark II specifically because of that feedback, especially in the Micro Four Thirds world. So there are times where we will do that, but it doesn't mean we're going to take the video functionality out of it. If you don't want to use those functions, just don't turn the camera into that mode. In fact, I would argue that the S1R Mark II and why this is the hybrid camera from us is that because we switched to the photo video slow and quick switch on this now, it truly does act as a photo only camera unless you actively turn that or flip that switch to go to video for it. So yeah, 100% the hybrid camera from the LUMIX lineup. Dude, this is a very good question. Can XQD cards be used like in the S1R? No, unfortunately not. XQD as a format is dead. XQD, while it is the same physical card design as a CF Express Type B, they are fundamentally different types of media. CF Express cards are PCI, yeah, I think it's, in general, it's PCI, or PCIe. For how they communicate, their file structure, the speeds at which they communicate, versus XQD, which I don't even remember what the file type or the communication design was on those. So if you're going to come up into this camera and you have a whole bunch of XQD cards, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use them. But that's also one of the reasons why with the launch of this camera, and we've done this in the past, if you're in the US, when you purchase the camera, you have the ability to claim a 320 gig CF Express card from our friends over at SanDisk. So you can get one of these, solid card, and be able to work with it. So, and I'll always have like a handful of these things floating around in my bags. There we go. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here because I see a lot of kind of repeat questions. Thanks for fixing the constant preview where screen exposure would lighten up and darken down. Can you please add that to the S5 Mark II? We've asked them, like, hey, it's cool that we've got it into the new, in the S1R Mark II. I want to see it in all the other cameras as well. And for those that don't like that, for those of you that prefer the way that we have been doing it, you can turn it off. You can have the system function like the old way. But yeah, from a stills perspective, you don't have, and actually even from video perspective, that focus acquisition, you don't have to have the camera do that brightening of the exposure because it would open the lens up. Yeah, it's much better. I know this is per user base, but what do you think the S1R2 is when it comes to photo video split? Something like 60-40 maybe? It's definitely personal opinion there. We design it as a 50-50, truly as a 50-50, so that you've got everything you need there. But for me personally, I'd say it's probably 60-40, 70-30 for me, leaning onto the photo side, but that's because I view it through the optics of I am primarily a photographer. I will use some of the video functionality. In fact, I love having things like 8K. I know a lot of people, like, they don't understand the point of 8K and all that stuff. I use it because I'm really not that great at composition. So having 8K means I can just recompose it later. And also, because 8K records at 300 megabit per second, and the 4K options, like if I want the 422 10-bit all intra, I could be up to, I believe it's like 800 megabit per second. There is a fallacy that 8K means your file sizes are going to be gigantic. It doesn't. It comes down to bit rate. So yeah, 8.1K is 300 megabit per second. And then if I want to go to 4K, let's do 4K. Let's do the 422 10-bit all intra. Yeah, if I want to do the full-blown 422 10-bit all intra, 4K 60p, full sensor width, that's 800 megabits per second. That's going to be a bigger file in the same given amount of time than the 8K. So keep that in mind when some are like, you know, why would I use 8K? It's just going to be more, like the file sizes are bigger. It's not, resolution isn't always the determining factor as far as how big your file sizes are. It comes down to bit rate. Yes, sometimes higher resolution can be bigger, but yeah, I shoot 8K with it. But when I do that, like I said, it still comes to like a 60-40, 70-30 split, honestly. LUMIX app for the OG S5, no info. I don't think so, because I don't think the USB port has the functionality to support it. Have you used the camera for astrophotography, and how did it do? I have. I have used it for long exposure photography. In fact, actually, I will post 3 photos that I've taken with this using Live View Composite back from Thanksgiving. I'll post those over on my Instagram account because I don't want to do it onto the global or onto the LUMIX USA account. So if you follow me, that sounds like such a plead for people to follow me. I don't care if people follow me. I will post it. You can find me online. I will post it. I actually think I have an Instagram account that's Sean at LUMIX. I'll post it there. I'll also post it on my personal one, so you can take a look at it. And at some point, I will post them in an area where I think you can actually view them a little bit better, because it's going to be Instagram compression for it. See, we've got a couple cool people in the chat here that I haven't seen in a long time. Are additional custom modes available beyond those noted in C1 through C5? Yeah, I think I covered that a little bit earlier. Is there a planned release date for the S5iix support on the LUMIX Flow app? I don't know yet, but we do have the expected compatibility for it soon. So, oh, Kofi is here. The goat has arrived. Yes. Hey, Kofi. Yo, I highly recommend if people want to see some other really cool like live streams and chats about this industry and the products, go check out like Cam and Kofi and Terry and all, and honestly like Zach, everybody. I think it's awesome to get, like I said before, perspectives from everybody, and you get a lot of cool information, and you can always ask. It's kind of the cool thing. You can always ask some of these creators about their experiences with it. It's not just the video that gets posted online. You can ask them for their opinions, and I encourage people to do that. Not one creator's perspective, not my perspective, not what a spec sheet tells you is going to give you the full story. You can go actually review and look at different questions about it. We're going to look at a couple other things here real quick. I got about another half hour that I'll be able to run through here for the live stream. I just changed the mode. Yes, it did switch. Good. All right. Where's the other thing I wanted to kind of talk about here? I wanted to talk about the, if I remember where it is, I'll go back to here for now while I'm trying to figure out what stuff is. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about, you know, I talk about how this is it's like 3 cameras in one, or can be up to 3 cameras in one, because of that photo, video, and slow and quick switch functionality. What we mean by that is, and I can go back into the camera now and I'll show you. So if you've used LUMIX cameras before, you know that we've had, or maybe you don't know, we've had the ability to change the set up so that if you went into creative movie mode and you set up things like your color profile, your white balance, your shutter speed, all that kind of stuff, that it would stay separated, that it would be in that creative movie mode, and then if you moved it back to, say, manual photo, that those settings wouldn't persist across the system. Well, we've one-up that system with this now with the hard switch. So if you go into the main settings here under the custom mode, which is the gear dial, and then you go to image quality page 2, and then go to photo video separate settings. This, by default, to start with, everything is set to be separate. So this is cool. This is important. This means that it doesn't matter what I'm doing out of the box. I don't have to think about it. All of these settings that you see on the screen here will stay separate between your photo and your video mode when you make a switch on that hard dial. But this is something that Matt Fraser and I, who actually I see Matt's in the chat too. Thanks, Matt, for jumping in and grabbing some answers to questions. You now have this option here called exposure control in PASM. When you go into this on the S1R Mark II, you have the ability to change how this camera operates for photo and video use of the mode dial. Now, I think Matt and I have a little bit of different opinions in some of these areas as far as like how I think most people are going to use it. But the whole purpose of this is to give you that customization. A lot of you that have been using LUMIX cameras for the longest time probably have it set where you're used to the way our system used to work, which was you'd put it into creative movie mode. And I'm willing to bet that almost 100% of you just put the camera right into manual because you're setting your ISO, your shutter speed, your shutter angle, your aperture, all those things manually. And that's how you're going to work. Well, this camera, by default out of the box, this camera is programmed out so that it reflects what the mode dial is set to. So if I want to go to manual, if I want to go into video mode and I was shooting in aperture priority for photo, when I flip that switch and I'd go to video, it's going to be an aperture priority video. Now I know people don't want that necessarily. Some do, some don't. So in this menu now, you go to exposure control in PASM. For video use case, because I'll always shoot video in manual, I don't want aperture, shutter, or program for any of that, I come in here and I say manual. What this means now is you'll see I'm in aperture priority for stills. That's my preferred method in the stills capture, but I will change that from time to time. Sometimes I go full manual, sometimes I go to shutter priority. But I always want it so when I go to video shooting and I flip this dial over, and I wait for the switcher to recognize what I'm in, you'll see that now it automatically jumped over and it is in manual video mode. It won't change based on what the mode dial is. So if I change the mode dial, it's not doing anything. I can put it in fully automatic and that overrides everything. That's a universal override in our camera. But as I move this, it reminds me and says mode dial disabled. You're recording in M in the menu. So if you want to go back and change that, you would have to go into the menu to adjust that. So this means that I can leave the mode dial in aperture priority because in my photo use of the camera, that's what I want it in. But in video, I don't have to remember to flip the mode dial or flip the photo video switch to video, then remember to go to the mode dial, change it to manual so that I remember that I'm in the mode that I want to be in for the capture I'm trying to do. It makes things super simple and straightforward for customization. The other big thing here is, because we talked about this a little bit before, your custom modes, so the C1 through 5 that's on the mode dial, when you're in photo, you have a bank of those for your photo settings. When I switch to video, and I wait for this to cycle, and I go back in here, I have a full set of them as well for video. So they're fully kept separate. So you don't have to use your C1 through C5 to maybe set one up as your photo shooting scenario, set one of them up as, you know, your high-speed video, whatever. In video, when you flip that switch, it's going to be video. That's it. That's what it is. And that's all that's going to be programmed in there. When I want to go to photo, now I have a full separate set for the photo as well. And last but not least, If I come through and I program something, like I want to program right arrow here for false color, I can click this, I can have my false color running, and I can be using that to be judging my exposure, and that's in video. But if I go back into photo and say, I don't want that to be false color, I want this to be IS statoscope. This is that mode that we have that allows you to kind of visualize the shake that you're providing on the camera. I can have this set to IS statoscope. And then when I go back into my video mode, this is now, that right arrow is again programmed into my false color option. So almost everything on this camera can be customized and fully separated out from photo and video use. That's again why this is like a 50-50 hybrid camera from LUMIX. Where do we go? We answered the bracketing question. Does it have a flash sync port? If not, how can we jam sync external timecode? So there is no external flash sync port, so the traditional ones that were used. And this camera doesn't accept timecode for jam syncing. Does new S1R2 have live view composite? Yes, it does, Michael. How is that? There's full frame zooms for live broadcast, but no broadcast lens for 4/3. No idea, man. Decreative, probably about like 20 minutes ago in the video I did. I'm gonna timestamp these because I don't want to necessarily repeat myself too many times. But yeah, I did talk about thermals and things like that probably about 20 minutes ago. So give me like probably 24 hours and I'll have the video timestamped. Flow app, is it possible to make it compatible with G9 Mark II? We can ask the engineering team. It's only scheduled as of now to be compatible with S5 II, S5iix and GH7, but we can give that feedback to the engineering team. Is there plans for the LUMIX Flow app going to come out for the iPad? Yes, iPadOS version of it is being worked out. So yeah, don't worry. iPhone or iOS for the phones is coded different than iPadOS, and things like scaling and UI design and all that kind of stuff are always going to be different. We're taking a very different approach on our app designs these days, as you can see from Lab and Flow, compared to like LUMIX Sync. So I think you're seeing more dedicated versions of this and more attention paid to the experience between each of these different platforms. So, well, the Cinelike, unfortunately, I have no idea if that's coming to other cameras. Dustin, I recorded in 4K 24p inside on the S1R2 and it didn't overheat. Going to be used next week on a corporate event coverage with photos. Will be a good time to test overheating. Awesome. Recorded until the battery died. Forgot to clarify. Yeah. Dustin, again, another one to take a look at Dustin's video. Terry's here. Geez, everybody's here. I love this. Thanks for fixing constant preview. We saw that one already. Flow app, is the chat just duplicating? Oh, okay, no, just a lot of people want LUMIX Flow for the other cameras. Oh, thank you, YouTube. Once again, echoing, whole eye recognition display. It's a fighter jet distraction. Many want a small, non-distracting square instead. Yeah, DJ, Matt and I have put that request over to the engineering team. In fact, I believe Matt put an entire really long email together, which was awesomely detailed about it. Sean missed my question higher up, so I'll ask it again here. Cool. Is there any APS-C mode for still shooting? Only if you use an APS-C lens. We don't have an option to necessarily go in there and say, for like raw shooting, that I want to set it up for APS-C. What you can do Actually, I have to check this because I haven't done this on this camera yet. What you can do is if you are in RAW plus fine, if I come in here and I say I want to do say an 11.5 megapixel image, or no, let's do medium. Let's do 22.5 megapixel. Is the option still in our menus here? Or has crop zoom, hybrid zoom changed it? Okay, so ignore what I was just about to say because we have replaced it. I don't know, did we? Not in there. Shows you how much I use anything like that as far as like cropped modes. Okay, so what you would be able to do if you wanted to be able to shoot, now this is only going to affect JPEGs, it's not going to affect your RAW files. However, this will tag your RAW files for your editing later, at least in Lightroom it would. You can do crop zoom, set the camera to say like medium is the smallest, you want to do 22.5 megapixel. You can do set image area recording, turn this on, and then now if I turn crop zoom on, you'll see when I push this in, it's 140 millimeters, so that's about a, what is it, a 1.4 times magnification. So that's kind of close to APS-C. I think APS-C is like a 1.5-ish, depending on what system you're in and the vertical resolution, all that fun stuff. So right now in crop zoom, this camera is capturing from a 22 megapixel image, and it's locked to a 1.4 times magnification. And it would just be that way for shooting everything. Your JPEGs will come out as that cropped resolution, but then the RAW file will have that cropped field of view tagged in it. So when you load it into something like Lightroom, I have to check if Capture One does this. When you load it into something like Lightroom, the RAW file will show up as if it was already cropped into that particular mode. You still have the full resolution that you can work with because you can undo the crop later. But this would be a workaround, or maybe not a workaround. This actually would be a pretty solid option for it instead of just saying, I'm only shooting full sensor width or full frame, and then I only ever have APS-C as the other crop because you can change it. If I come in here and say, set this all the way to XS, and then I come in and adjust the control of it, which I have to program something for that. Crop zoom. So if I want to do this, I can program this all the way down to, how far are we going? 424 millimeter, and I'm on the 100 millimeter macro right now. So we can see the beautiful, foggy, hazy New York skyline out in the distance from our office here. So yeah, you can do it. It's just a bit different than telling it to go to APS-C crop on its own. You would just pick medium on this camera. Will Pro Photo Flash's lag issue be fixed with S1R2? I've not had any experiences with the Pro Photo triggers or flashes. I can check with people that are using the camera with those strobes to let you know, but yeah, I would imagine so. We need APS-C crop mode with RAW format in camera for photo mode in all LUMIX cameras. I know I can crop and post, but I have that on my Sony bodies, but it's not on the other S1R2. I understand, Andy. Hopefully what I just showed you would maybe help. Is there an online resource available to explain the menu setup and settings to new users? Usually the biggest block for new switched users. Thanks for the separate photo video, by the way. We are working on trying to get an entire series out that would be how to set the camera up, what the menu options go. It is a very big undertaking, and I think we were trying to want to get something out prior to the launch or to have it at the day one availability, but just video production takes time, and something like that is a very long process. If you want a general understanding of our menu system, at least as far as like our terminology and what options mean, you can take a look. If you go to the LUMIX Global account, if I remember, I'll try to put this in the description. Matt Fraser actually did, when the S1 series was launched, an entire series that were like 2 to 5 minute long videos that walked through the menu, gave you an explanation of what it was, what it did, a video demonstration of it, and showed you in the menus where to find it. They're still applicable to this camera. There's just more options in this camera now that may not be covered in the original series, but it does exist out there. Welcome to Newark. I'm back for a little bit. I used to work in this building every single day. I'm glad I live down in Austin now. It's a lot warmer there. Could you break down 4K 120 mode? I hear pixel mode is the way to go. I'm going to save the video conversations a little bit for when we can do a stream with Matt Fraser on as well. That's probably going to be in a week or two. I have to check with Matt and find about our schedules, like where we can line up for this. And I would want to do that back when I'm in my home office, because I have this set up to do guests on the stream. And we're rarely in the same place anymore. So, follow you, man. We are trying to get an in-city meetup. I'm actually probably going to be in the city tomorrow, because I'm here through the weekend. In fact, actually, I'll be at the Best Buy in Midtown on Saturday. We're doing an event over there. Unfortunately, the event's already at capacity, but I will be over there. Yeah, so if anyone's over there, just, kind of show up around. Kofi says, L-mount question, is there a conversation about third-party lenses? Love Sigma, but lenses like the 10 millimeter Laowa and the Blaze R Apex line are lenses I think that would do well on some Lumix cameras. So, Kofi, I think most of that stuff, like Matt kind of answers it there, it's definitely it's a Leica decision. I think ultimately it's a Leica decision. I think all of the Alliance members, at least the founding members, have input and say on what's kind of going on and whether or not it's beneficial to the group. But those companies have to basically just communicate to Leica that they want to be part of the Alliance, and that's how it goes. Terry says, show them the lock switch. Yeah, so on the, actually, let me do it this way first. Unplug this. So on the, actually let me change to this view. So on the S1R Mark II, you'll see that we have a lock lever switch now. So I can toggle this and I can lock out settings. But the physical switch only gives you one part of that story. So let me plug this back in, and I'm going to show you what you can do in the actual menus with it. So menu-wise, focusing on clouds, even with PDAF, does not work. So with this, I can go into the setup menu, and then I can scroll down to the operations menu. This is where it's going to be, your quick menu settings, your touch settings, all that kind of stuff. I can go to lock lever, and I can program each of these things so that when I flip that lever switch, it locks them out. Obviously, an unlocked lock means that I will still be able to change those settings. A locked lock means that it's going to be locked out. I don't know how many times I can say lock. For those that have been telling us for a very long time, I want to be able to lock the thumb dial on the back so that I don't accidentally move it when I'm in video. You have the ability to come here and lock specifically that option. In fact, by default, when you flip this lock switch, that one gets locked. It has been adjusted and shifted so that it's actually further back, and in the time that I've been working with this camera, which is probably one of the longest outside of our engineering team, I have never bumped into this rear thumb dial and had it change a setting on me. So to show everybody what I mean, yeah, we're here. So to show everybody what I mean, this, put it into the light. The office does not have great lights, and I don't have my lights with me. This dial right here has been recessed further away from the back of the camera, so it sits further in on the chassis, so you're way less likely to kind of hit this. As I mentioned, we've got the kind of the clicky locks on there. I think, Terry, I'm going to take a line out of you from your stream. It's like ASMR for clicking. on these buttons. Really nice positive locks on there. Keeps everything nice and kind of protected. Yeah, keeping things from changing when you don't want them to. Let's see. All right, we're at 3:30. Cool. So we're at 3:30. I do have to call it now because I do have some other things I have to do today. But thanks everybody for the awesome questions. I know I did not get through everybody's questions, and I super apologize for not getting through them yet. If I did not answer your question or you want more clarity on your question, drop it as a comment under this video. Does a couple of things. Means that I can research the question for next Thursday if it's something that I don't know off the top of my head. It also helps us with the algorithm. It helps more people see these videos so that we can grow and get more people to see what it is that we're doing. LUMIX Live is one of the bigger initiatives that I'm really excited that the company supported me in doing when the pandemic hit. Being able to provide a platform for you guys to speak directly to us, ask your questions to us, be able to demonstrate stuff. And it's been amazing how much this has grown over the last 5 years, almost 5 years. And we're just going to keep growing it. So if I didn't get to your question, or if you think of questions that you want me to talk about next Thursday, put them in the comment section under the video. It helps out tremendously. It means that I'm going to be more likely to be able to actually get you a more full answer instead of kind of off the top of my head or kind of going through this. I think it also helps Matt too, because he doesn't have to always be jamming through the comment section and typing it out. But yeah, I will be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Probably actually back from my home studio, except I hope from my home studio. And then after that, we are going to be at WPPI. If you are going to WPPI, which is in Las Vegas at the Rio this year, stop by the show. We will have a presence in a number of places. A couple different of the booths. We'll have people from LUMIX there. So yeah, come to the show, check it out. I think it'll be probably the first major experience for you to get hands-on with the S1R Mark II. Yeah. Outside of that, yeah, I'll be back next Thursday. I'll be in New York City at the Midtown Best Buy this Saturday. So if you are based in New York, definitely head out there. The event that we're doing is already at capacity, so unfortunately we don't have any more space for registration at the event. And then, yeah, if you're in the area, I know I'm going to be hanging around for a while even after this event. Yeah, I'll have the camera with me. You'll be able to check it out. Other than that, thanks again, everybody. I hope you have an awesome day. Go out there, check out all the reviews across the board that have come out. Support all the creators that are out there that cover camera equipment in general. They bust their butts to get as much information out there as they can for you, whether it's our products or other products. They're wealths of information. So, yeah. With that, I will catch. Oh, Luke, what mic is Sean using? I'm using these Saramonic mics. Actually, these aren't like fancy mics. These are like their like social media kind of mobile kit. It's the first ones I grabbed and brought with me. But yeah, other than that, I'm gonna stop rambling. Have a great day, everybody. Hope you all get out there, create some cool stuff. Follow us on social. We're over on Discord. It's discord.gg/LumixUSA. Go check out the conversation over there. I'm active mostly on there. Yeah, later. Bye.